All righty. Hey, welcome, welcome. Great to have you here today. We have an amazing show today. And we're going to be talking about the Idaho 4. And I have got with me a guest who is a trauma nurse.
Yes.
Okay, trauma nurse
Intensive
and
care.
intensive care.
Trauma norm. Yep.
Yeah, so I'll let him tell the details about what he's done. But we were having a conversation a couple of days ago. He knew nothing about the Idaho 4 case. He's from Australia, but that, I mean, of course, you on the internet, you could learn about it, but he hadn't heard anything about it. And so I was telling him briefly about the injuries and everything and about the case. And he had some very insightful information. And I thought, you know what? I haven't really heard anyone talk about the injuries.
Or the medical perspective on it.
Yeah. Come in where people can see you. Okay, there you go. Yeah.
Sweet.
And I'll move this closer. So it'll pick you up fine. Yeah.
Oh, I can't see myself.
There you go. We're
There we
gonna
are.
get this done. That's why I say you could have gone downstairs and then you would have your own little square on your computer. But yeah, we'll do it this way. This is fine. So I want to say, number one, we are going to talk graphically, medically about these details, about what the injuries would be like. He has experience as a nurse when somebody comes into the hospital with these kinds of injuries and dealing with them. So he knows. And so this is going to be a graphic conversation. If you've got kids around, don't let them be like listening to this. Put your headphones on or earbuds or something in, or just watch it later if there's kids around. And if you've got some kind of trigger issue, this might not be the show for you. And so that being said and out of the way, because we are going to just talk freely about this subject. And so I want to share the screen. Well, before, tell us about you. Go ahead.
Okay, so my name is Tony Logue. I live in Australia and I'm a registered nurse, critical care registered nurse. I have my master's in trauma and intensive care nursing. I've worked in emergency most of my time, and I have witnessed some of the most horrific murders, accidents you can see in modern life. When I heard this story, particularly what interested me was the police reports and the timelines of death, of apparent death. It just doesn't make sense.
But the detail of why we're going to save to the end.
Okay. So I've done some research on basically the main victims of this. The two main victims of this, the one who was unrecognizable.
Yeah,
Kaylee, and the gentleman who was hamstrung. Okay.
Ethan
was more particularly interesting to me because hamstringing is actually a very, very rare form of injury. And I don't think I've ever seen it in my 25-year career ever. It's actually a method of injury that's sustained, was used in medieval times basically to render someone lame. But the fact of the matter is it also is a very slow and painful death, and it's usually used to incapacitate someone to watch somebody else be tortured. If that makes sense?
That makes perfect sense.
Okay.
But let's get into like more details of that in just a minute.
Okay.
But those are the two things that really interested you.
Yes.
And I'll mention now, even though I kind of have it set up for later, but when it comes to the hamstringing and it comes to the unrecognizable, these are terms that like over the last year, people who've been following this case okay, but last night I wanted to find the source because especially the hamstrung,
Yeah.
it was a police officer that had said it. That I remember.
Mm-hmm.
And the unrecognizable, I thought, well, maybe it was Kaylee's father or, something, I couldn't remember the exact source of who said unrecognizable, but that, and it's we're
From what I've
talked
From
about.
what I've researched, it seems to be the family members that have made these comments.
Yes,
There's
but
no
I
official
couldn't.
reports.
So last night I searched. I
Mm.
searched for the unrecognizable Kaylee, and I searched for hamstringed Ethan, and I also searched for MPD, Moscow PD Police Department officer Corbin Smith,
Mhm.
who is named in Officer Brett Payne's affidavit, which is the PCA that we have that we all look at is actually Exhibit A of the PCA.
Okay.
And so he says that he came later, and then Officer Smith, who was one of the responding officers, showed him around. All right. So, and showed him the crime scene. But what I had read was there were two responding officers. One of those responding officers had some kind of sworn statement or testimony where he described entering the home, the smell that hit him on the first floor as he entered the home, and seeing a body in the doorway, because the door was open at that point. And so I'm guessing that maybe that is where I latched onto hamstring or hamstrung. Ethan was hamstrung. Maybe came from that. So I searched everywhere. I found nothing.
Okay.
And that's suspect to me.
Absolutely. So I'm looking at the actual severity of the murders.
Mm-hmm,
and as we were explaining the smell, the constituents of human blood.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So most people understand you smell blood. It's constituents of the metals that are in our blood, iron or whatever it is, all the hemoglobin. They come out as soon as we bleed. You can smell those. So the amount of blood in that house, the smell would have instantly hit you. It would have been just instant.
Right.
The fact that it was leaking out of the house also is suggestive of somebody who was taking their time for absolute torture. All right. So that's where I'm sort of leading to the first victim, the unrecognizable victim, would have been eviscerated. Okay, she was open from this to this.
So so let me give some background for people. And
is this live or recorded?
It's live. It's live, but we don't have any comment, and nobody's commenting or anything, but that's okay. So I am gonna have to go like this in order to share. Window, entire screen, okay. And so, and just so that you know, like if I make this smaller, you see that it's like sharing the whole screen. So I'd have to just, maybe so, I'll go like this so everyone can see. Whoops. So, of course, I added this graphic warning, discussion of injuries committed during a crime. You also go by ENA Logue, ICU trauma, CCRN, to give a medical perspective on the Idaho 4 case. So, a little bit of background. The murders occurred on February 13th, 2022. So, wait. No, they didn't. Where did I get that from?
I think you're right.
No, it was in November. Oh, I wrote February. It's November. Let me change that. We all know it's November. Okay. So then would it be the 13th? Let me double check. I mean, hey, I know. Okay, so we're live. But let me just check here. Idaho for murder date. Okay, yeah, November 13th. Okay, guys.
So a year ago.
Yeah, so we have to be, so November 13th was right before the Thanksgiving break. Okay. Now the Latah County, Latah, I think they say Latah County coroner, Kathy Mavet, has been the coroner for 2 decades. And I want to specify that the coroner, she is an RN with a legal degree, but she is not a medical examiner.
Mhm.
And so she does not do autopsies.
No, she can't.
Basically, she signs the death certificate.
Mhm.
That's her job.
Yeah.
So what she said, she has said things that conflict with the PCA,
Mhm.
but we don't know. I mean, the PCA is probable. It's the police laying out their story of what they think happened.
Mhm.
They are not obligated to actually have facts. So not everything in a PCA is necessarily fact.
It's just a story
It's
written
the story,
on interpretation.
right? And
Right.
they, within that, they can list some facts. And I've got a previous show where I go through and I say, okay, what did they say is a fact, and what did they say is something that they are proposing? But so here are some things that she said. So with that in mind, she said each victim was stabbed a different amount of times and in different places on the body.
Mhm.
Okay. She also said it was not possible to determine from the injuries the order in which the 4 victims were attacked. Now that means from the injuries themselves.
Okay.
The evidence at the crime scene of blood splatter and blood trails and things like this would absolutely be able to and also blood samples, and this one is only one person, this one is 2 people, this one is 3 people,
Well, the mere fact that you've got 2 victims who were asleep, who had their necks slashed. Is that right?
that well, there were, as we were like really looking for original sources last night, we did come across where some people that were not verified said Ethan's neck was slashed.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. All right.
Okay. I just moved this down so you could see if you were like in the picture. So you can no this way towards me. There you go. All right. And this came from the Independent in the UK. All right. And it was this story where she said, where this was reported as what the coroner said. So now, the injuries. Let me just go over this, and then I'm going to stop sharing this screen, and we can come back for the next slide.
Mhm.
So we've got Kaylee and Maddie on the 3rd floor. What we know is that her liver and lungs were injured.
Mhm.
She's the one that was named as unrecognizable,
Mhm.
and her injuries were worse than Maddie's.
Right.
Maddie, we have 0 details said about her other than we know that there were multiple wounds, because they said they all had multiple wounds.
Yes.
Okay. Ethan and Xana on the 2nd floor. Xana had defensive wounds.
Mhm.
Her father mentioned bruising,
Mhm.
and the unnamed source by News Nation was the one that said that her fingers were nearly sliced off.
Yeah.
But we don't know if that's credible or not. It likely
It
is.
most likely would be.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I've already described about the hamstrings.
Yes.
I mean, as far as the source of it, but
Yep.
we are going with it for the purpose of this show,
Yes.
because I am positive that I saw it as a police officer description, which means it would have been what I read of the because it's not in the PCA, it's not in Brett Payne's affidavit, right? Exhibit A of Brett Payne, it's not in that. So the only other police account that I would have heard would be the one of the responding officer, which I could not find after hours of searching yesterday. All right. Dylan, and so among injuries, we need to note that Dylan on the 2nd floor and Bethany on the 1st floor had no injuries. Okay. So I will put this, let's stop sharing this for a moment. And what can you tell us as a medical perspective?
Okay, so first of all, I think I'd like to concentrate more on the woman who had injuries to the liver, and what we normally call this is evisceration.
Okay, so this is Kaylee.
So this is Kaylee. Okay. So this is obviously the main injury or the mortality of the main victim was the open of the peritoneal exposure. So and desanguination, which is loss of blood, and penetrating injury to thoracic cage and plate implied by a pneumothorax. Okay.
Okay.
So a pneumothorax, for people who don't know, is usually a puncturing of the lung, either through blunt force trauma or through a stabbing. Okay. So when we talk about the peritoneal space, we talk about the area which includes the liver, the gallbladder, the bladder, spleen, and the intestine, which is supplied by the main descending aorta, which is a main artery which leaves the heart. And when this splits into what we call the hepatic artery, which leads into the liver. Okay. Now, I don't know whether or not it's interesting to you to know about the anatomy of the liver. However, the liver in itself is about 1.5 kilograms. It's quite the largest gland in the human body. And it usually takes around about 800 mils, I'm not sure in American, or 1,200 mils of blood per minute. So it's the amount of blood that enters the liver at any one time is around about 10% at any given time. So
10% of your body's blood is in the liver, is going through the liver at any point. Okay, so the liver has multiple functions, but we won't go through the function of the liver because that just really probably doesn't matter. Right.
Okay. So, in most cases, a penetrating injury to this area will almost be fatal without intervention. I know very little without other injuries sustained. I haven't been able to look at any of that, but this is all conjecture from what I've learned. Intestinal injury can result from blunt force or penetrate to it, and the majority of blunt abdominal trauma does not result in intestinal injury. So most time when someone is smacked or hit in the stomach, it will hurt, but it will not cause any injury. Approximately 3% of blood abdominal trauma results in intestinal injury, but the small bowel being the most common location. Penetrating traumatic injury is less frequent than blood trauma. However, it is more frequent and results in intestinal injury. Penetrating trauma falls into two main categories, right? And this is the most important thing. High energy projectiles, which is either shooting someone or high energy stabbing. Okay. To 83%, depending on the size of the person, they can survive that. In patients with abdominal stab wounds, especially of the liver, okay, without intervention will certainly cause mortality. The very act of abdominal evisceration. So when we talk about evisceration, from the story from what I've been told, this person was cut from the sternum to the bottom of her stomach. She was opened up.
And see, this when you mention that, that's new. This is from your research that you did yesterday.
Yes.
And then we went to sleep and, and woke up this morning in time for the show. And so I have not heard that, that she was cut, that there was, but it kind of makes, wherever you found that, it makes sense because the coroner even was saying it's not all stab wounds. There's slashes, there's gouges.
This is the interesting thing.
And by the way, because you've got it there to read. He's not reading Google, okay? He spent time researching and getting his thoughts in order and writing it out in an essay.
Yeah.
So okay. So these are his own words.
So I do apologize if it seems a little dry, but I have because some of this information is actually quite complex, and I need you to understand.
Yeah.
Especially the amount of blood that was found at the scene. And this is why I'm trying to explain this, okay?
Yeah.
The very act of evisceration, is to cause complete agony in someone, as well as sometimes, in case the organs are not injured, the person can actually be still alive while they're open. Okay? Keeping a person alive and or conscious is part of an act of torture. So in any case, the victim most likely will either lose consciousness at some point due to what we call hypovolemic shock. Okay, hypovolemic shock means a loss of blood, but the very act of opening somebody up will keep them alive as an act of torture. Okay?
So if I'm a person that is cut open, I'm going to be in pain.
Oh, you're going to be in absolute pain. You're going to be in absolute agony.
And I'm going to be screaming.
Yes.
Unless something was put over my mouth.
There is absolutely no way that no noise would have been heard.
Because even if my mouth is covered, I'm like that.
It's an impossibility.
Okay.
Even the struggle in itself.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
The other interesting thing I think with this victim was the injury to the thoracic cage, which is what we call the chest area. Okay. We call it,
like the rib cage.
Right.
Kind of thing.
From what I gathered, this woman also suffered what we call a pneumothorax, which is a puncturing of the lung. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The second method treated is that the trauma to the thoracic cage, the conjecture of blunt trauma or penetration, either way, will cause leak into the pleura. Okay. So once the lung collapses, the lung is surrounded by what we call the pleura. Okay. The pleural space. When the lung collapses, all the fluid in the air enters the lung and pushes into the lung and renders that person unable to breathe, but still breathe to a point where they're still alive in some cases. Without intervention, that will definitely kill you.
Because you're like using some like upper part or something. There's like a little bit that.
So what I'm thinking here is that this person had a pneumothorax on the right-hand side. They were injured on the right-hand side. Which may have caused what we call a tension pneumothorax. Okay. Which means that the air is trapped, moves over, and then starts to compress on the myocardium, on the heart. Okay. And so these injuries are fatal, but the person will be able to live for a certain amount of time to be in pain and to be tortured. Right. Okay.
So that's really sad for the family.
Exactly.
I apologize to the family if they hear about all of this, but we are looking at this realistically from a medical point of view.
Now, pneumothoraxes are a common injury. Actually, most people get them, and they can usually fix themselves. The most common pneumothoraxes that we get are in young men, and they're spontaneous, and they are asymptomatic, and they usually fix themselves. But when we're talking about a blunt force trauma or a stabbing pneumothorax, that's a completely different story. Okay, so I do have an X-ray of this, but I'm not sure whether or not we'll be able to put that online. But I have had a look at the X-rays of this, and the X-ray shows the area field of pleural space and a lung collapse. What you notice is the opacity of the lung has completely disappeared. This also occurs on the right side, as I said, moving into the heart and the rest. It's hard not to be too dry. Okay.
So even though if now we don't have the coroner's report, the autopsy report, so we don't know whether this type of injury was on the right side or the left side, or I mean we just know lung.
So let's assume it's on the right side. Okay. So the X-ray that I have managed to look at. The X-ray shows an area field of,
and this is just a general X-ray. This isn't Kaylee's X-ray.
Yeah, but this is an X-ray of a similar injury.
Correct. Okay.
So the X-ray shows an area field of pleural space and a lung collapse. The lung opacity is gone. This always occurs on the right side of the thoracic cage, and always, without intervention, is fatal. The expansion of the pleural space causes the lung and the fluid to push up against the right ventricle, left atrium, and left ventricle of the heart, decreases the stroke volume, which is the heart's ability to pump blood out. This causes bradycardia and certain death. This is caused by the displacement of the myocardium. The intervention for this is quite easy. So for symptomatic relief, penetrating the second intercostal space with a needle will relieve that pressure. That didn't happen in this case.
So
whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing.
Okay. That's an important point.
Right.
But like for the audience and everything, I would admit, because you get a stab wound in the lung, you think that that's going to be like stabbing a balloon and the air all goes out.
No.
So explain what really happens.
Okay. Either way, if you stab someone in the lung, you obviously going to have desangration. You're going to bleed. You're going to hemorrhage from there.
Okay.
However, the air won't come out the wound. The air will stay in the pleural space and push the lung up against the heart. The only way of getting the air out is to punch someone through the chest.
Mhm.
Okay, stabbing someone in the lung, the air won't escape that way.
Well, okay. I'm just like thinking here, and if I'm stabbing, because she was stabbed 50 plus times, which we could not find the source of, but everyone here that's been watching for a year, not me, but watching this case for a year, knows that was said by someone, and so it wouldn't one of the second or third or 40th.
No, what I
Make
think
that-
what I think is that injury was sustained first
Mhm.
to keep her alive and incapacitated,
Mhm.
and then the gentleman who was hamstrung
Mhm.
was done to watch the rest of it.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So she was injured in order for this person, this guy, Ethan, is it? That was
Ethan was hamstrung.
to watch this.
No. Kaylee's not in Ethan's room.
Okay, that's fine.
That's Xana. Yeah,
All
yeah.
right. Either way. So
Yeah.
in any case, you can survive. However, in the case you will die. So that's one part of it.
Right.
We've talked about the liver evisceration once again.
Mm-hmm.
But the hamstring one is the other one that I really interested me. Hamstring is a method.
Before we go, let's finish up let's finish discussing Kaylee. And so in your experience, people who have these kind of injuries that, I mean, I don't know. Well, first of all, have you had someone still alive that comes into emergency that's unrecognizable, or are they already dead and going to the morgue? Okay. But so somebody who has been viciously stabbed,
Mm-hmm.
you have encountered that.
Yes.
So what do you know as a medical professional about this type of crime where someone is stabbed so much? I mean, I know there's FBI profiling and all that kind of stuff. They can talk about it, but
the psychology behind these sorts of murders is not just about the murder in of itself. This is a murder about hate. This is a murder to someone that had some sort of grudge, but people who normally kill somebody out of self-defense is usually 1 or 2 stab wounds, which are fatal. When you're talking about 50 plus stab wounds,
mm-hmm.
we're talking about somebody who knew exactly what they were doing. They were told what to do, and it was vicious and it was a psychopathic person but it was professionally done.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who was able to do this did it professionally.
Okay, so you got either the person themselves that hated, that had passion. When we say passion, that passion that could have been love turned into anger.
Absolutely.
Or something. You either have that person directly doing this.
Absolutely.
Or you have a professional that was told, make this person unrecognizable.
Absolutely.
It's
Absolutely.
kind of leans toward one of those two.
Those sort of murders are, as you said, they're usually involved with severe emotion.
Mm-hmm.
So either jealousy or whatever it happens to be, or they're hired to do this to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It also makes it very, very difficult to find the perpetrator when they mutilate people like this. Okay.
Okay.
Because the difficulty in finding DNA in mutilated bodies is extremely difficult. Okay. In most cases, the perpetrator who does this
mm-hmm.
will leave their DNA, but it will become contaminated by the DNA of the victim, which makes it very, very difficult to identify someone. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the stab wounds that she sustained, the initial injuries that she sustained, she may have survived for some point in time, and then the rest of the people may have been killed. But this is a vicious, planned, thought-out attack, without a doubt.
Not a crime of passion.
Oh, it could be a crime of passion.
I mean, in that, like, spontaneous.
This was not spontaneous. This was a planned event.
Mm-hmm. Just based on what we know. We don't have all the evidence.
Because the timeline that you've shown me does not fit. It is impossible.
We'll get to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. And so Maddie, we don't really have much to say. They were both killed on the same bed. Okay. If you've got two people in the same bed, and there have been people that have wondered, did Kaylee walk in on the person killing Maddie or whatever? But no, I think it's pretty safe to say that they were both sleeping in the same bed because Kaylee had all her bedding packed away. She'd already like moved out of the other room. Okay, so she's just staying for the night. She's staying in the bed with her friend. That's a normal thing. Okay. And so the killer or killers come in. You've got two people on the bed. Knowing what we know about, we don't know a lot about Maddie, but knowing what we know about Kaylee, could Maddie have been alive in the bed while that is taking place on Kaylee? If it would, let's go with the police say it's one killer. So if it's one, I mean, if you have two, obviously you can have, okay.
So the injuries are sustained by these two people in that one room.
Two people.
What were those injuries? Were they?
We have Kaylee that had the 50 plus wounds and unrecognizable. Cool. And we have Maddie, who the only thing we can surmise is that she had multiple wounds.
No, Maddie would have been killed first. Would obviously be the slicing of the trachea and the carotid arteries. Okay. So basically, once you do that, you slice the trachea, you reduce someone's ability actually to talk and to breathe. Okay. Once you slice these two arteries here, which are the carotid arteries, which supply your brain, our brain uses 15% of our blood volume. So at any given one time, when these arteries are sliced, it takes at least 2 minutes for you to die. Okay. So it's a very quick death, but it's painless. All right. So the person, So
I didn't know that.
The person may have trauma from the feeling, but they would die within 2 minutes. Okay, so it's brain death is very, very quick. Okay. All right.
So any additional step? I mean, well, we don't know that her neck was slashed.
But if I'm looking at it from a logical point of view, that woman would have had to have been killed first. There is no way that killer would have been able to do that and then do what she did.
To do what he did to Kaylee, he could not do what was done to Kaylee if Maddie was still alive.
Absolutely, there's no way. Right. Because obviously there would have been self-defense involved in that as well. We don't know whether or not she had defensive wounds either. Okay, that's the other thing.
No, nothing has been said about defensive wounds on Kaylee.
But she was not. She was recognizable.
No, yes. Maddie was recognizable.
Yeah, Maddie was recognizable. So
supposedly, I mean, nothing was ever said. There was debate in the chat room, like on Reddit or whatever. There was debate about, was it Maddie that was unrecognizable or was it Kaylee that was unrecognizable? But I think in the end, it finally got sorted out that it was Kaylee.
So she would have had to have been killed first and very quickly.
Maddie would have had to have been killed first to be able to spend the time needed
to do
with Kaylee.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. So I think that's, unless we want to talk about like the strength involved, if we want to go into,
okay.
I mean, I think maybe before, let's say, so for these injuries, what does it take for someone to do? I mean, strength wise or whatever.
To kill someone like this would have had to be somebody who was extremely strong, extremely adept at what they were doing. In order to mutilate a body and stab someone 50 times, you would have to be quite a fit gentleman to do this, quite strong, and you knew what you were doing. The mere fact of driving a metal blade into somebody is extremely physically demanding to do, and over again, it's physically demanding to do. So what
about adrenaline?
In a killer like this, adrenaline probably didn't have too much of a part. This is probably done by somebody who knew what they were doing. Okay, driving a blade 50 times into somebody, what you got to understand is that you're breaking through cartilage, you're breaking through bone, you're breaking through all this. So in most murder cases, blades will break. And that's how they find. Most blades will break, especially after multiple stab wounds. Okay. In this case, there was no blade break. So this was done by a professional.
Not that we've been told, right?
But there was. So to stab someone 50 times, you would have to have spent at least 15 minutes doing that. This person was a strong, hired individual. There is no way, I believe, from what I know, that this could just be some frat boy kind of
somebody who's skilled in hunting.
Maybe, maybe. But once again, that physical demanding ability to kill someone at that point, and all the rest of them.
Because we're just talking one person.
One person, yeah. That's what makes me think it's professional. It has to be. Because
what about somebody who's just a general military person, but they're not necessarily an assassin by trade, but like there's a lot of paramilitary groups and things like this, and people that have served in the military that are discharged and things that live in this kind of area.
Look, it's possible for anybody to be able to do this in the military, as I said, but what is the concerning and the overall factor is there's no DNA there.
Yeah, I mean, they collected some DNA, but the police have, it's been pretty much, there's not, there's a substantial lack of evidence.
Which makes me think that this person knew what they were doing. Absolutely. Okay. So you could have a hunter, you could have something, but the skill to be able to conceal someone's DNA at a murder scene, at such a large murder scene, is a beyond skill. Like, this person knew exactly what they were doing. You have no trace of murder weapon, no trace of anything. DNA is just not just a flake of skin. It could be you can leave a viral DNA. You can sneeze. You can whatever it happens to be. Your shoes. Nothing was found. Okay.
Yeah. And what about sweat? Would you be sweating, working up a sweat to do this kind of
yes you would
crime?
Yes.
To create to make these injuries?
Yes.
You would be sweating.
Yes, absolutely. Which makes me feel that this person was concealed. Okay, so who was doing this to stop this from happening, he would have had the skill and the knowledge to conceal the DNA. So that means he was either in a suit or he was concealed to a point where none of his DNA was left at the crime scene.
Right, no sweating. So if you just had like a hood or you call them the balaclava, the ski mask, but according to Dylan, she just saw somebody clad in black with a face mask with bushy eyebrows, which means the eyes up to the eyebrows. Because usually if you have a ski mask, you don't see someone's eyebrows, right?
No, you don't.
So it couldn't have been that. Assuming what she says is true, right? Then, so you would have areas that would leave, that sweat would have dripped off.
Absolutely.
If what the PCA tells us about what she saw was what she saw, then there would be DNA, from the very least from sweat.
From anything, absolutely.
Yeah.
But there was none. There's nothing there. So
right.
This person, whether it be a hunter or whatever, knew what they were doing.
Especially if it was Brian Kohberger, as the police are suggesting, then
I don't believe it.
The only DNA of his is on the snap on the sheath. And that's touch DNA.
So
he would, that wouldn't be, even as much as you study criminology and stuff. It's not that level of professional. Most likely.
That gentleman would not be, I don't believe would be capable of doing that.
What we know of Brian Kohberger, if he did not leave if there is no DNA in that house, except for on the sheath, which is what we're led to believe by the police and the PCA, then it would be unlikely or there's like no way that he would be at that level to
No,
inflict these
if
injuries.
he and the fact he's actually he's passed in his degrees in criminology. And that why, if you were going to murder someone, why would you leave evidence like that behind?
Because you're in a frenzy and you don't notice it.
No, this is no frenzy. This is a planned attack. You don't leave something behind like that. You leave something behind like that to frame someone, to divert the investigation of somebody else.
And you're not saying necessarily the police, but if you were the killer, you would leave something like that behind
Absolutely.
to frame somebody else
So
take the attention off of
even,
yourself.
So you can even look at someone who organized this, let's say, and said, we've got this person's this belongings, let's put this here, leave it at the crime scene. That will divert their attention away from the real perpetrator.
Right. Okay.
The touch DNA on that is just, it's just
Right.
not.
And I think where this is Mama Kitty, I think where some people get confused is that the term touch DNA implies that you touched something. Like, here's my glasses.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
I touch my glasses, I leave my DNA.
We leave our DNA everywhere.
But touch DNA would really be more accurately described as transfer DNA.
Absolutely.
So I shake your hand.
Yep.
Here, shake my hand. Shake my hand.
Yep.
Then I put on my glasses.
Yep.
Now your DNA is on my glasses.
Absolutely.
So the very term touch DNA means that you didn't touch it.
Yeah. But the other thing that also is interesting about that
I'm a kitty.
is interesting about that is DNA will expire over time as well. So how old was this sheath, and how long was it there, and what was the age of the DNA that they found? This is
Can you tell that?
Absolutely, you can.
Okay.
Because it's an organic substance, so it will break down over time.
Like half-lives and stuff like that.
Absolutely. So you will find strands of DNA and you can match it, but depending on its age, and you're saying that what, 6 or 7,
less than 10 cells. And I also tried to find where's the source of that last night, and I could not find the source of it. But I know like I can't remember the name, the young couple. Anyway, they did a lot of digging into the whole IgG and this and that and all, which is not the topic of this show. And they, but I couldn't find it. I couldn't find the number of cells, but it was less than 10.
It's not enough. Look, that would not be enough to suggest that was the person who killed it. It's just an impossibility. It really is. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Okay. So now let's go ahead. I think we've covered everything on the upstairs murders. So let's look at what happened downstairs. It was Xana's room, and Ethan was her boyfriend. Ethan was staying the night, so they were both in the room. There are reports of a 4 a.m. DoorDash that supposedly Xana went downstairs to receive from the driver marked it received, not delivered. Now, I don't have a DoorDash app, so I don't know if there's a difference between delivered and received, or if received means that, could also mean that it was just set outside the door and left there. Okay. I don't know, but it's supposed that Xana is the one who accepted a DoorDash delivery. It was jacking up. There's pictures of, sorry. There's pictures of a Jack-in-a-Box bag with Xana's name on it on the kitchen counter, like through the window as the crime scene was being processed. Right. So we've seen this DoorDash bag. Right. Was the food eaten? Was it not eaten? I mean, if was the murderer already in the house? The police say they cleared the DoorDash driver. Did her phone order it? There's so many questions about that, but there was a delivery at 4 o'clock. So according to the police, if that's when the killings happened, because I think there's still some questions that they might have happened at 3 o'clock. But Xana was awake on TikTok accepting a DoorDash. We don't know anything about Ethan, whether he was awake or if he had already gone to sleep and she's just on, got hungry. Did she order something for one? Did she order something for two? I don't know. It's weird. So Xana was in the doorway or near the door. She was definitely on the floor. Ethan may have been on the bed. Ethan, and I'm pretty sure, and we're going to go with the police officer account, the responding officer account that said that he had been hamstrung.
Okay, so this is a very good point of interest, and I'm going to get a little bit dry with this one because hamstringing is a very, very rare form of torture.
Okay. So this is not something that
this is not something that your average person does. However,
your average murderer.
However, when we talk about hamstringing too, it's also a part of hunting to incapacitate animals. It's a very good way of doing that.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
So
interesting.
In humans, the hamstring, sorry about this, but we got to get dry. We need to know the anatomy of this. You need to understand that this extends between the hip and the knee joints, okay? The hamstring muscle group is made up of the bicep. We won't talk about this part, but this facilitates the flexing of the knee and hip extension, okay? Making it a vital contributor to normal leg movement. By severing these muscles or the tendons involved in this process, normal leg movement is disrupted, in addition, sustaining massive bleeding, okay? The injured leg becomes useless. The victim is rendered lame. The severing of the hamstring is usually accomplished through a blade, such as a knife or a sword, okay? You have to cut through a tendon, it has to be done with a military-style blade. Can't be done with a kitchen knife. I mean, okay, so.
Well, and I know even like for those of us that in the kitchen, you're dealing with chicken or beef or whatever, and you get those tendons, your kitchen knife needs to be sharp.
Absolutely.
If your kitchen knife is dull, you're going to have a hard time cutting through that. And if somebody cooks you that meat and you're trying to chew it with your teeth and you get that tendon, that's not it. Grizzle is just fat, right? Grizzle is fat. Yeah. But those tendons,
even when a tendon is cooked, it's still hard. But you can imagine in a human body, the tendon and the tension that's involved in a tendon is extreme. To cut through one, you know what you're doing. You have to know what you're doing. Okay. So in many cases, this is usually done to slaughter animals and render them ataxic. We call this ataxic, that's unable to move. Okay. It's an unusual technique not seen in modern medicine. However, was a popular technique in medieval torture to usually render someone lame. Okay.
Medieval torture.
Okay. Absolutely. Okay.
It just made me think of something. Keep going. All right. I'm gonna. Go ahead. No, keep going. Yeah.
Okay. So the posterior knee joint. So when we talk posterior, when we hamstring someone, we're talking about. When I talk posterior, we're talking about behind, not in front, not in the knee, but behind the knee. Okay. The posterior knee joint also includes the popliteal artery, which can be severed in this form of injury. Like any untreated arterial injury, this will cause severe blood loss. Okay. However, it can be slower and a more prolonged process. However, in the case of murder, adrenal tachycardia, which is a speed up of the heart, can speed up the process of death. In this case, it can be contributed to keeping someone alive to witness the death of another and render them incapable of assistance of the victim.
Oh, let me just show you. Here's a K-bar size, showing a K-bar size.
Yeah.
By the way. Okay, go ahead.
So that sort of knife would do the job. So.
Okay. I know you haven't, did you see this in your research, this image?
No, I didn't.
Okay. So I think most of you guys have seen, because you mentioned medieval, it just clicked about this. This is the Sigma Chi of in Idaho. And for everybody, let me see if I can. Okay, if I open the image in a new tab, and then I share this tab, we can do that. So, sharing the screen.
Well, that
Wait,
certainly looks like a medieval helmet by any.
let me see. So if I go here, and then why am I not sharing that tab? Because it's showing the whole screen. Okay, wait. Let me have to stop doing that. Okay. I'm sorry to interrupt, but at least you have it in writing, so you can like go back to it. I mean, when we're done looking at this window. Okay. So there. So I think most people, if they've been following this case, have seen this picture. This was prior to the murders. The Sigma Chi were just like, playing. All right. And so they're just acting or whatever, but they've got these like medieval helmets on. They have a K-bar, and people have always said, did police check, like, do they have their K-bar? They have a K-bar. Did police take, swab it, say, okay, where's your K-bar? I want to see. Oh, well, we don't have it. Or like, oh, well, here it is. Did they even ask?
They would have to have. I mean, look, if the injury sustained would have been a knife of similar description, that is probably one of the first things you'd want to know. You'd want to DNA swab that to see what's going on. However, in multiple murders, it can be difficult. But at the end of the day, I don't know what to say to that picture. That really fits into my narrative, to be quite honest, because in modern day times, when people incapacitate people, they normally slice the Achilles tendon, okay, which is a much more painful way of doing it. And again, a person won't die.
Yeah.
To hamstring someone, you're slicing through the popliteal arteries as well, and that will definitely kill them, but it will kill them slowly.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to piece together why that happened. Okay. Either that was done because he was trying to escape, or it was done for him to witness what was going on.
Oops. To witness what?
To witness what was going on.
That's not good. I'm just like checking to make sure that like we're on the YouTube. But so in that case, someone's only one, as far as like Xana being a target, it would be more likely that someone's wanting to inflict pain, emotional pain, and torture on Ethan as a target more than on Xana as a target. They could both be targets.
Absolutely.
In that room.
Absolutely.
But why wouldn't you just, okay, it's like if Xana was my target, I would want to incapacitate
You want to
Ethan,
incapacitate the male.
but I'm just going to want to kill him, not leave him alive. So that then I can do whatever I want with Xana, right?
Slicing through this, so hamstringing someone, the death would take probably 5 minutes.
That's just from the hamstring alone. That's not from other injuries, whether his neck was slashed or other stab wounds.
And if it was bilateral on both sides, you can double that. So 2 minutes, 3 minutes of death easily. Incapacitated enough to know what was going on, enough to know you were going to die, and enough to know what's happening inside the house.
Right.
It's a very good way of incapacitating a person so they can't get help. So he's found near the door. Was that right?
No, she was found in the door. It was said that but okay, according to the police PCA, Xana was on the floor at the doorway.
Okay. And he was in the bed.
Presumptuously.
Yeah. So that's a very, very good way of incapacitating someone in bed. If they're lying on their back, you slice the back of the knees, done. Done and over. That person can't help and they will die. And they will most likely see what's going on with that person next to them for a while.
So what does it take to do I mean, or like who would do this?
Okay. This is the other thing. So I guess I'm trying to look at this. I'm looking at this from a very limited perspective, but the death of the victims in their sleep. So again, conjecture the rest of the death. However, let's assume there's injuries to trachea and the carotid arteries, severing the trachea will always cause hypoxia and lack of oxygen. In this case, it also looks at the severity of the severing of the carotid arteries and split bilaterally on the right and left, which split to the brachial arteries in the arms as well, which originates. Okay, so the death of these people would have been in minutes. It's a quick and at times traumatic cognitive thought shuts down, and some consolation to the death of the victims would have been quick and painless. Okay, so I guess trying to skip through in conclusion, it's very hard because the main goal of medical legal death investigations really is to determine the time and causes of death. This becomes more difficult when presented with a victim that has been mutilated, dismembered, and scattered across multiple crime scenes, okay, which is what's happened here.
Well, not the scattered part necessarily, but the mutilation part.
Perpetrators will dismember their victims for many reasons, including concealing the identity of the victim, disposing the body, and retaining the body parts as reminders of the crime. The way the crime scene appears and how the victim is dismembered and how the parts of that body that remain are crucial in determining the cause of death. Okay, so we really don't know exactly what caused these people to die. So there's no autopsy report. Okay. The identity of the victim and the perpetrator, they are 4 different categories of dismemberment, all have implications about the perpetrator, including their identity, their mental state during the commission of the crime, and the motive. The most important thing is the motive. The history of dismemberment or serious injury like this. Okay, so I keep tool mark identification was also researched to determine the weapons used at the crime, to clues to how the victims were dismembered. Crimes of this nature have not been studied to determine the trends and statistics that would aid solving them.
Okay,
that's
so
very
we don't
important.
have statistics.
It's very difficult, okay? So the majority of dismemberment crimes studied involve male perpetrators at 76%. So it's definitely a man. Okay?
76% of mutilation dismemberments
are caused by male murderers.
Yes,
always. So very, very, it's almost impossible for, look, I'm not going to be sexist, for a woman to be able to carry out this kind of murder. Okay. When broken down into age brackets, similar distribution was found amongst men and women. The category dismemberment that occurred in 69% of the cases was defensive mutilation. So the defensive wounds here as well.
Like, so if the fingers were dismembered, if they were actually cut all the way off, but it was defensive.
It's usually defensive, which is a result of a perpetrator attempting to hinder the victim's identity, which is a common way of cutting the fingers off. With the combination of the case studies and forensic psychology research, approach was validated in use of medical legal investigations cases involving dismemberment. Again, this can also be attributed to severe hate, links with sadism and psychopathy. Which leads to why, in this case, the main victim was reported to have been mutilated beyond recognition. Okay, so in conclusion, from my limited understanding, the entire scenario was completed by a professional assailant. It is said that the main victim had up to 50 stab wounds and was unrecognizable. The ability to hide DNA is a professional attribute. And most people think DNA is a flake of skin, hair left behind, blah, 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 as we've talked about before, okay? This seems to be a very well-planned murder involving a professional assassin. DNA can seem achieved by a person so congruent with a forensic method, it is difficult to assume that this was done by anyone else. Also, the mutilation suggests that someone with anatomical knowledge of killing someone effectively with no trace. So the person who did this knew exactly what they were doing. Okay. To stab someone to such a degree is a physically exhausting effort requiring at least 30 to 40 minutes. The killing of the other people, easily 10 minutes. So the timeline that was presented does not make sense.
Right. So you're saying 15 to 30 minutes for Kaylee alone and another 10 minutes for Maddie. Maybe we don't really know her injuries that well. And then for downstairs with Ethan hamstrung with a fight going on. What about, I mean, it's hard for me to think like, so if I'm hamstringing Ethan so it tortures him as I'm killing Xana.
Yes.
What's Xana doing while I'm hamstring? Because she's fighting, right? We know she's a fighter. Her dad says she's a fighter. It was one hell of a fight down there. There could have been like chairs turned over and things strewn about. I mean, it might not just be injuries. We don't know the evidence of the condition of the room for it to be one hell of a fight just by the injuries or by everything. So how am I if I'm going to Ethan, Xana's jumping on my back or something?
The way I would see the scenario,
or vice versa. Yeah.
Ethan was incapacitated first.
And what's Xana doing?
That doesn't matter.
Unless he incapacitated Ethan while she was getting the DoorDash. If that was her and not someone framing the phone.
To make a scenario. But we're talking, as I said, we're talking about someone here with extreme physical strength.
Yeah.
The ability to know what they were doing. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're attacking somebody, if I say
if it's one person, if it's one person,
okay. All it takes for that man to turn around is just punch her in the face. Get him off, punch her in the face, get her off, do what he has to do.
And the hamstring. And so from the victim's perspective, if I've been I'm a 6 foot something guy, I've been my hamstrings have been cut.
Not only that, but your popliteal arteries have been cut as well, so you're bleeding out at the same time.
So I'm bleeding. Am I in pain?
Oh yeah.
Am I screaming?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. And that leads again to the murder of that lady who was mutilated. There is no possible way that there was no noise. There was no possible way that whoever survived in that house did not know what was going on. It would have to have been one hell of a fight. Right,
is what was said. And here, I know you guys don't see, but here's the Mama Kitty. So it's one hell of a fight. There's noise. Not only is there noise and there's screaming, and there's altercation. Describe from a medical point of view the blood, the smell. I mean, what's the timeline on the, so Dylan says that because Bethany doesn't say anything. Dylan says that at 4:00, 4:15, she sees someone exiting the house, which is weird. The police are saying that she saw the murderer leaving the house. What is the smell at that point?
Okay, so the smell at that point
just happened.
If it's just happened, would be very little at that point. Okay, you would smell it to a degree, but then over time, once blood starts to congeal, which happens, then the smell becomes a lot worse.
And like an hour, half hour, 2 hours,
15 minutes.
15 minutes. We're talking minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, and the next point in time is I want to know for like smell, right? The next point in the timeline would be 9:30 is when there's multiple reports of people in the community, not the police, but other students, knowing that these murders had happened. And so the calling the friends over was probably around 9:30. What would the smell have been like? So if they happened at 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 5 hours,
instantly you would open the instantly as soon as you were, even before you open the door of that house, instantly
the whole house, it would permeate the whole house.
Absolutely.
At that point.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
You'd probably be gagging.
Absolutely you would.
And by 12 o'clock, we know that when the police got there, the one that I read that I can't find says that when they entered the ground floor, the first floor, that we call it in America, we say first floor for ground floor. When they entered that door, they were hit by the smell.
Oh, absolutely.
At 12.
Absolutely.
So at that point, is it only the blood that's smelling, or is there decomposition smelling?
No, decomposition probably wouldn't have started at that point. The decomposition is a very complex process. But there would have been, the smell would not have been from the bodies itself. It would have been from the desangulation. It would have been from the blood. Okay. Plain and simple. Because the constituents of our blood, the best way to put it is we have a lot of metallic constituents in our blood. Good example of that is iron, hemoglobin. Okay, so they're the smells that start to permeate.
Right.
Once death occurs, decomposition will start, but you won't get a smell until that person starts to rot. Okay.
Right.
There's certain processes within the human body, especially the bloating and the processes that
would take longer.
That takes longer.
Yeah.
So those things start.
And quite frankly, I'm not sure, like if it had been a couple of days before they were found, which it wasn't, but when you have that many stab wounds, and various sacs that are within the body are all permeated, it seems like those gases aren't trapped.
Oh no! That would be she would hemorrhage out completely. Absolutely.
For the gas. When we normally think of a body bloating, those gases aren't. There's too many. If
the
there's
body
puncture wounds,
the body will still bloat.
It will still bloat. Okay, good. I don't know. That's why I'm asking.
because you still got because in our intestinal tracts we have certain bacteria and things that break down, which are natural flora. These things start to break down. These gases can't escape. Even if you have stab wounds as well, they will congeal to a point. You will always bloat, regardless of the form of death. Okay, that is just the way it is.
All right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, so the overall timeline from the moment you enter the house, we don't know. We've talked separately about the upstairs and the downstairs, and maybe who would have been killed first in those rooms, but not which room was first. We don't know. But overall, from entering the house, killing the four people, according to the injuries that we know about, and then exiting, what would that total amount of time be?
For a professional, at least it would have to at least be in between half an hour and 45 minutes.
A half hour and 45 minutes.
Absolutely. Could not have been done in a 10-minute timeline.
Or less than 10 minutes.
Or less than that.
According to the PCA.
It's just the injury sustained to that young lady on the bottom floor. Or
wait, you mean the unrecognizable? That's the top floor.
To do that sort of those injuries, you're taking your time. That in itself would have taken at least 20 to 25 minutes to complete.
Wow.
Okay, so you're slicing someone open. All right.
Right, because it's not just let me count 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. It's not like that.
It would have been a vicious attack, but the initial mode of injury would have taken some time and thought. This person knew what they were doing. They kept them alive for a certain amount of time by doing what they've done. That's almost like a surgical incision. Okay, they've kept them alive. They've done what they've done, and then there's a frenzy of the stabbing.
Right.
Okay, so in that of itself, that main part murder would have at least 15 to 20 minutes at least.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to add about these? I mean, that you've discovered? Or...
No. I mean, look, I guess I did a lot of examination of the physiology of this. I guess it really doesn't fit. It could be a bit dry, but I'm more than happy to discuss anything about the mode of death through evisceration and how it happens and why it happens. But no, there's very little I can add. But from what I've been told, the whole scenario, the whole timeline does not make sense at all.
Okay. All righty. Well, thank you. Thank you for your medical perspective.
You're welcome.
And maybe you can come on again and on another case or on another topic of this case.
Maybe next time I can
sort it out.
Yeah, I can be a little less scientific about it and be a little, because I've written a huge essay about this. So I wish but yeah, look.
Well, now you've had the experience, you kind of know how it flows.
Yeah.
I'm curious to get in, because I'm in StreamYard, so I'm curious to get into the YouTube side of things, because I'm wondering if maybe this topic they're like holding it back, you know.
Could be.
So
Could be.
We'll end it here. Yes, we'll end it here. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you everyone for joining.